I felt as if it would be a good opportunity for me to do something greater than myself.
This is when the Iraq War was starting, and I wanted to be part of it. I didn't know if I was in favor of it or not, but it was something I wanted to experience.
The old cliche of being broken down before you're built up again. I think that's true.
It's pretty surreal. Taking care of this guy who was screaming that he had seen his dad killed in front of him. We just knew that we had to take care of this guy. I mean, he's bleeding into his chest and needed a chest tube.
You're responsible, like literally responsible for dozens of people's lives.
I wanted more than ever to sort of stay with these people that I'd grown even more close to, that I couldn't have ever imagined.
And I said, and I came up with this while I was in Iraq, that the most important thing I could do was come back with honor.
I guess I kind of dug myself in a hole, maybe, perhaps, because I didn't even attempt to integrate back into civilian life at the beginning.
It's very important that there not be a divide between those in uniform and those in the civilian world, and it's a two-way street.
We have 500 military veterans here at Columbia. It's a very sizable number of people and very important to the Columbia community. Really made a very big impact.
The opportunity for Columbia in having military veterans in our classes and on campus is that we have people that have had very real-world experiences. And these people come back on our campus with the maturity of the real world and add a dimension to the classes that provide a humanness, a real-world discipline that people can look at and say, gee, I would like to be like that.
I see the military veterans as a huge storehouse of knowledge and experience. These veterans who've been on the ground know how difficult it is. And they know that there are some policies that are well-intended that may be impossible to implement. I have learned a lot just listening, because there's nothing that can substitute for the experience on the ground.
When I first showed up to Columbia, I was in the International Affairs program, and I didn't initially run into anyone that wasn't really intrigued by my experiences. I had really positive responses when people found out my background, and most people were at least overtly impressed, but beyond that, didn't ask further questions.
I think some people might be a little apprehensive to really ask those questions. It could be their preconceived notion of what a military person is, what they hear in the news, they hear about, military people are, they're extreme, they're strange, they have their own way of doing business.
When I first got to Columbia in 2005, there was certainly an awkwardness as a former military person.
When my peers find out that I was in the military, initially the first reaction is shock sometimes.
Early on, there's an element of curiosity, but there's also an element of, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to ask, I don't know what to do. I've heard it over and over that you're the only person that I know who's ever served. And so I think there's an element of both curiosity, but that's quickly replaced by, if you get along well, with an element of, I think, pride and respect.
A lot of students are kind of, they kind of don't know how to handle people who are in the military because like all of the Hollywood output is like PTSD, and everybody's going to be a crazy veteran who's going to snap, and so most of them are they're fairly careful asking about it. I've only had one or two people ask the stupid questions of did you ever kill anybody?
Sometimes the conversation doesn't come easily.
A few of us from the Military and Business Association at Columbia were walking out of the main gates, and there's a protest against the war, which is fine. People have the right to. Hell, I don't know if I support the war, but the vehemence with which they held their opinion and the words that they used were almost overwhelming. I mean, throwing out the phrase war crime and genocide and comparing Bush to Hitler. I'm looking at these people protesting and I'm thinking, you know what, you have every right to not support the war. You have every right to refuse to pay your taxes if you don't want to, if you think it's an illegal war. But you have no idea what you're talking about. I don't think those people have ever spoken to a veteran before in their life because they would have recognized that what was happening in Iraq is not nearly what they think is actually happening in Iraq.
I actually try to stray away from discussions of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq with my classmates, just again because I feel in a sense they may not understand where I'm coming from. So if that's bad, it could be.
A big turning point for me was when the question of bringing ROTC back to campus came to the fore. It brought out into the open a different point of view, at least different than I had heard before, to include that veterans weren't able to talk openly in class, or that maybe we weren't willing to think for ourselves, and some other things that were fairly shocking in terms of how we were characterized.
I do think there is this huge gap between those who haven't served in the military and those who have served as far as their knowledge about the military. And I think bridging that gap is really done by just being more engaged in the general public. And I think even this documentary is part of that bridge building process.
The film came about because some of us were sitting around at lunch one day and wanted to help our classmates understand our backgrounds in a more robust way. My grandfather was a World War II vet, and before I went to combat, I was really timid about asking him questions about his experiences. Once I went to combat and came back, I realized that there's certainly nothing wrong with asking certain questions. I mean, there are some things that are probably inappropriate, but that he wasn't unwilling to share his stories, just like I wasn't unwilling to share mine. By creating a film that had some of our experiences and then showing some of the diversity that exists within our community could help the non-veteran population understand where to begin that conversation in the first place. Less than 1% of the American population has served in our military in the last 10 years. And because that's the case, there is a divide that precludes one segment of the population from clearly understanding the other.
Since Vietnam especially, there's a tremendous gap between institutions like Columbia and the military. They're unhealthy for the military, which therefore recruits disproportionately from other parts of the society. It's unhealthy for students who have no contact at all with military realities. It unbalances the armed forces, deprives the armed forces of a certain perspective. It perpetuates the naivete of students with respect to the idea of military service.
So as a university president and as a dean, I have felt this strain over the past 2 to 3 decades myself personally. There is a historical framework for thinking about this. World War II was a time in which the vast majority of people in the United States felt that this was a just cause.
Columbia was, without a doubt, a center of military culture in the sense that, for example, it commissioned thousands upon thousands of ensigns in the Navy, more so during some periods than the Naval Academies.
But then 1968 came and the Vietnam War. And a real sense of division between the government and the policies and younger, especially students, but younger people.
I think it became apparent to everyone there in the law school shortly after arrival that it was time to shed your veteran identification and get with the program at Columbia Law School.
The professors, even if they had some idea we were veterans, maybe some of the professors might have been veterans themselves, they certainly didn't say, well, let's hear the Army point of view on this question.
This university is now a means of production producing the mechanisms of human oppression. It's been bought out by the military. 50% of the research done here at this university depends on defense money.
Our guys and girls getting back from Iraq and Afghanistan are not getting spit on. They're being welcomed and thanked for their service, and I think that says a lot for how our American culture has matured.
I remember one time my wife and I were up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We were visiting our son, who, by the way, was in ROTC at the time, is now commissioned. And as we were driving away from the school, we saw a sign over the street, and it said, "Hate the war, love the troops." And I turned to my wife and said, 50% ain't bad, and that's the important 50%. The point being that even those who may have disagreed with the policy supported those who were implementing it, and that's as it should be. Again, also important that those in uniform do try to reach out to those they are serving.
That was followed by the increasing sensibility in the United States on university campuses that the treatment of gay and lesbian people by the military was unjust. Universities had long since decided that we would not, it was wrong to treat gay and lesbian students differently from other students. And until that could be worked out, the sense of the historical problems that emanated from the Vietnam War era really couldn't be addressed.
It's ironic. Despite the experience, I wanted more than ever to sort of stay with these people that I'd grown even more close to that I couldn't have ever imagined. But at the same time, I also realized I was gay. So I did not want to live. I decided towards the end, the early 2005, as my time was expiring, just because you served your 4 years of active duty, that it was time to probably make a good decision not to risk, as Admiral Mullen recently said, is today going to be the day that someone outs me?
On the Abraham Lincoln, I actually came out as gay to my entire chain of command, but they didn't pursue it, and they didn't want me to hurt my career. And I know, probably saying this, I think I still have 1 year left of inactive reserve, so I guess I'm not gonna talk about it until the policy is changed.
It was the very, very important shift on the don't ask, don't tell policy that then opened up this prospect of a kind of re-engagement, a kind of reconciliation. But now I think we're on a very good path again, and we have a lot to build, but there's a historic shift.
Some of the veterans have told me that they came initially to campus feeling that they might be venturing into hostile territory based on what they'd heard elsewhere about Columbia, and that they were very pleasantly surprised that the administration was quite welcoming.
Columbia itself has been so great, contrary to what some would expect, about veterans, promoting veterans, really wanting to draw them out, have them in a classroom, pulling veterans into the general studies program and at SEPA. And I don't think the administration could be more helpful.
The university's on a learning curve, which is a good thing. Military's not going away. It's a part of our life, and Columbia University is not going away. So we should learn to maximize the opportunities for engagement in a positive way between these two seemingly disparate populations. I don't know if they really are that disparate. In some cases they are, but not across the board.
Once you get over that barrier of, okay, the person's not going to scream at you, they're not going to do anything to you, you realize, okay, we can have a real good conversation about this.
I don't think you'll ever have true understanding between civilians and the military, but hopefully we can move towards having a society that actually cares.
It's really important to have that conversation and have a meeting halfway so that these two cultures, civilian and military, can understand each other better and figure out ways to work together for a common good. I think that in order for the country to be less fragmented and less polarized, those conversations have to happen, and a university is a fine place to have them.